Hello, Canucks fans. Welcome back to another episode of Canucks Conversation, brought to you by Bet365. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. My name is Dave Gugelli. Joining me is Harmon Dial. I say it every show, but today is a big show. Got to stay on topic today. I'm going to do my best. There's a lot to get to. There's a deal with the New York Rangers that we have to talk about. There is a mid-season press conference with the general manager where he didn't say very much. Didn't say very much today, Harmon. Did Patrick Allvin. We're going to get to that. We've got a game to talk about. We've got a lot to talk about. But first thing I want to know, how was your weekend?
Honestly, the whole weekend was this JT Miller drama, the waiting for the other shoe to drop. This past weekend, the last 2-3 days have been the type where you're just refreshing your social media feeds all the time. You're texting people all the time. You're waiting at any moment for news to break. I'll be honest, every time I, for example, step into the shower or take 15 minutes to go on a walk or something, and I don't have my phone on me, I am just waiting, expecting news to drop as soon as at the most inconvenient time.
I'll be honest, I thought we'd have a trade by now. I thought we'd be breaking down a trade on today's episode, and I texted you guys as much before the show. I said, I'm not sure what's going to happen tomorrow, so just be ready to be fluid. I had an inkling that we would be talking to Patrick Allvin, but I didn't think that would be about a JT Miller trade. Again, mid-season press conferences aren't always about stuff, certain things. They are just a thing in the NHL. In fact, most teams have already done their mid-season press conferences. I think the Canucks were one of the last teams. So anyways, we talked to Patrick Allvin today. We'll get to that. But first, people want to talk about this Canucks Rangers deals. A lot of people in the chat today. Going to get a lot of takes. Speaking of the chat, let's tell you about our Super Chat. Our Super Chat charity partner this season is the BC Mental Health Foundation. You want to make sure your question or comment gets on the show. Hit us with a Super Chat. Proceeds from our Super Chat will go to the BC Mental Health Foundation, changing the face of mental health and addiction by supporting breakthroughs in care, public understanding, research, and knowledge exchange. Harmon, let's start from the top here. We've known for a while now that the Canucks were shopping both Miller and Pettersson. After Thursday night's game, actually, I wasn't on the show on Friday, but after Thursday night's game, if I were on the show Friday, and I'm sorry, I didn't listen to you and Irf on Friday, I didn't have time, but if I were on the show on Friday, what I would have said is that was JT Miller's last game in Vancouver. And I would have been wrong because he played again against the Edmonton Oilers and the Vancouver Canucks. But I'll be honest, I thought that was his last game. I thought they would get a trade done before that game against the Oilers. I really thought that. I was going to say that on Friday's show. Gladly will take the L on that. But to me, that game against the LA Kings was the final straw in my mind. That had to be it. That had to be it for JT in Vancouver. It almost was, it sounds like. This is what Elliotte Friedman had to say on Saturday. Hockey Night in Canada. Play the clip, Jacob. We have it. Sportsnet's Elliotte Friedman on Hockey Night in Canada talking about this whole thing with JT almost sitting out.
So it continues. Now, JT Miller, I expect, is going to play tonight unless something changes at the last minute. But there was a time over the last 24 hours where JT Miller was not going to play. He was going to be held out of the lineup because talks were progressing on a trade. I believe that team to be with the New York Rangers. Now, I don't know exactly what happened, but that trade is off right now. So there's nothing close that would prevent Miller from playing, but things had progressed to a certain point where it definitely looked like he wasn't going to play. Elsewhere around the Canucks, earlier this week, the Canucks sent out a note warning teams about tampering, saying that, look, nobody is allowed to talk to any of our players without our permission in advance. I believe now at this time, some teams do have permission to talk to Miller. Not sure who it is, but I've heard that there are some teams that have been granted permission to him. And the other situation we're all watching in Vancouver is Elias Pettersson. I heard this week that Pettersson, who does not have no trade protection yet, has told the Canucks he would like to stay.
Okay, so a lot of information there. Let's focus on the Miller aspect of it. The deal with the Rangers supposedly has fallen through. At the time of this recording, Monday, there's been no trade, but you never know. You never know at this time, as Harmon was saying at the top of the show. There's been no trade. There was no trade, although there was close to being one. Harmon, just your initial read on this, and we have some more information. We have some reaction from Miller as well, but just as we lay out the timeline of events, what was your reaction to that report from Elliot Friedman?
Yeah, right off the bat, I mean, the fact that it got to the point where both the team and player thought that he might sit out Saturday's game, that speaks volumes to me. And it also speaks volumes that in the aftermath of that, neither the player nor Patrick Allvin in today's press conference denied that or shot any of that reporting down. I think we're at a point now where, let's be honest, JT's name has been on the trade block off and on in Vancouver for years, but this time really feels different. Now, there was a time in 2022, whether it was around the deadline, around the draft, where rumors were really strong, and sure, there was a lot of noise and a lot of people expected JT Miller to be gone. I don't think it ever got this close. And honestly, once you look at how quickly the story has progressed, how deep they got in these conversations, that's not the type of decision you can, like, once you open up those can of worms, I don't know if you can walk back from that. Like, even if this specific deal falls through, it really seems like the writing is on the wall that this management group believes that this core group needs a shakeup. And let's not forget, for the Canucks to have gotten to the point where a deal related to Miller was even close in the first place, that's not just something that you do as an organization on an emotional whim. That's something that you've thought out. That's something that you've calculated for a long time. And you don't make that move unless you're certain, like, you're trading your number one center here, right? You're not doing that unless you're convinced as an organization that something is wrong with the core and that big changes are not ideal, that they're necessary.
Some more reporting as we go through the timeline. Some reporting from Dollywall to what you just said, Harmon. 6 weeks ago, the Canucks decided that it was going to have to be one of Miller or Pettersson to get traded. Obviously, it looks like they've decided on Miller, but let's not close the door on Pettersson either. But it looks like Miller right now, with what we're being told and what we're seeing, that it looks like they are pretty dead set on trading JT Miller. So the timeline of events as we continue down here, we get the reporting again. This was from Dollywall, and I believe Drance as well. I think Drance also did this for The Athletic, that the Canucks met in a boardroom on Saturday, Canucks management, and they almost hammered this trade out with the Rangers. The Hartford Wolfpack, the Rangers AHL affiliate, held out 3 players, but it's unclear who was a part of this deal. That being said, over at The Athletic, a package of Ryan Lindgren, Philip Hedl, and a first-round pick was rumored to be the return to the Canucks, and again, courtesy of The Athletic, the key hang-up in that being the conditions around that first-round pick. So that's really interesting that was kind of one of the key hang-ups, I think, was the wording that Drance and Dollywall used, but the trade didn't go through. The trade has seemingly fallen through, but I agree with you, Harm, that the tone of all of this and the level that it's gotten to now, like, this isn't just trade rumors at this point. This is more than that. This is, like you said, you can't put the toothpaste back in the bottle. Or you said some sort of analogy similar to that. But they can't go back now. Like, it feels like you can't go back. There was also, I think Matt mentioned on Scares and Price today that the Canucks players all went out for dinner thinking it was maybe Miller's last hurrah on Friday night. And he comes out Saturday, and I think that's the next step in this story. Canucks take down the Oilers. The Canucks beat the Oilers, give 15 shots to the Oilers at home. To me, like, this isn't, see, there's the real Canucks. No, this is, see, like, this is what this group's capable of, and how shameful is it that they can't do it on a nightly basis?
Yeah, it wasn't, this could be a turning point that amidst all the trade rumors, they're going to get things back on track. It really felt a lot more like one last good push with this core group, knowing that their days together are numbered. And again, you're right. It's such a shame because the way they played against Edmonton that first period, how they came out flying, the way that they were pressuring pucks, the way that they were just dominating 50-50 battles, the competitiveness, seeing the way that Miller and Pettersson were so heavily engaged. It's like that was last year's Canucks team, the identity, the work ethic, the urgency, and those staples and non-negotiables that would often talk about that lean towards a lot of the buy-in side of things, that has been up and down. It's been wavering. It hasn't just been, oh, they've dealt with injuries like that. Injuries, of course, are the biggest explanation and reason for why they've underperformed this season. But when it comes to like that Edmonton game showed, they have a completely different gear when they're actually on and engaged, but they can't hit it consistently this season. And I think that is an issue. Like that's fundamentally the biggest issue outside of injuries with the team this year.
Patrick Allvin also spoke today. We're going to get to that. Injuries is going to be a theme of what he had to say at his midseason media avail today. But you're right, Harm. Injuries are an issue. There's all these things, but at the end of the day, it really does seem like this management group has just decided that, you know what, something stinks with the core and they got to change it. And I'm not saying JT Miller stinks. That's not what I'm trying to say, but like they have their pulse on the locker room better than we do, better than any fan does, and they are the ones that seem to be making this decision that something's got to give here. And it looks like it's going to be Miller, but we don't know that. We don't know that, so let's not talk like JT's gone because he's not gone yet. And I will say, because people are already asking, if and when a trade happens, whether that's JT, whether that's Petey, whoever it is, if it's an actual shakeup to the core, if it's Brock Besser, there's another guy we're going to talk about later. If there's a trade, we will be going live. Like, we will have an emergency episode. Got an anniversary dinner tonight, so I might be in the doghouse a bit, but we will go live. We'll figure it out. We'll go live and we'll put out something. We'll put out something for sure. No matter who's traded, but it does look like a shakeup is needed for this team, and I don't think you can deny that. We can sit here and absolutely, like, we can have the conversation about trade packages. You're going to lose a JT Miller trade. You're talking about how much you like JT Miller. Like, I'll listen to that. I'm absolutely on board with that. But at the end of the day, like, this team has been so inconsistent, and JT Miller's been at the forefront of that, Harmon. Like, let's not beat around the bush here. When he's off his game, he's losing them games. He lost them that LA game. And again, I'm not doing a Pettersson versus Miller thing. Pettersson's been bad too. But when Pettersson's off his game, he's not moping around the ice. He's not actively hurting you. He's just not going out and winning you games. There's going to be a massive hole at 2C if and when you trade JT Miller. I'm not gonna deny that. I'm not gonna deny that. He is this team's number one center. But like, if this management group is sitting there and saying, yeah, we don't like JT's attitude when things don't go well and we need one of our leaders to be better than that, I'm not going to sit here and say, no, they're wrong about that. I don't think that's a bad take.
Well, what you have to be hoping as a Canucks fan, if they go down the road of trading JT, it seems more likely, although we, as you mentioned, can't close the door on a Pettersson or a Besser, is you're hoping that the benefits related to locker room dynamics and team chemistry can be significant. Because if you're talking purely on ice, I don't care what you want to say about, and I agree largely with what you've said around, JT's been inconsistent, and when he's not on his game, he makes costly defensive errors. But ultimately, even with those blemishes in mind, you're still talking about a high-end top six centerman. You're not going to win that trade. On paper, especially in the short term, that is like you're giving up the best player in the deal for this season and the next couple after that. The mode for winning, the path to winning a Miller trade relies a lot on like hoping that there are off-ice chemistry and team dynamic related benefits, that you are able to weaponize the added cap space perfectly. And then just hoping that whatever you do get back in return exceeds expectations. Like it has to be all three. It's not just going to be that you in this trade you're going to get back the silver bullet that solves this team's issues. And I should also clarify, I don't think it's as simple either as you make one trade to shake up the core and now all this team's problems are solved.
Yep.
Like
absolutely.
let's make no mistake. This isn't about pointing the finger at whether it's Miller, Pettersson, Besser, like whoever ends up going. The point isn't to point the finger at them and say, see that like this guy's been the issue related to locker room dynamics, team chemistry, whatever it is. Management has a lot of work that is going to need to get done even after they go down the possibility of shaking up this core. And it's not going to be easy. And man, this is going to be a difficult challenge.
Yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see how they approach this. We got a super chat in the YouTube chat here from Adam Voth, regular listener to the show. Thank you so much for the $5 super chat. That's really nice. He said, "Is there any situation, any trade where the Canucks actually win the trade?" And Harmon, this is something obviously you just talked about. It's all three things. It's the cap space, of course. It's the players coming back. Like, what can you get from them? But I will say, when we talk about a return, and I brought up earlier in the show that rumored return of Lindgren, Hedl, and a first-round pick. And people in the chat immediately got very upset. I will remind everyone that Bo Horvat was traded for Aatu Ratu, a first-round pick, and Anthony Beauvillier. Anthony Beauvillier was in that trade to make the money work, okay? If that's your return, and I know everybody's going to point to Philip Hronek, that cost him a second-round pick. Look at the trade alone. Because, yeah, maybe they'll go pivot and acquire a top-4 defenseman with something that they get from the Miller trade. But look at the trades in a vacuum here. Like, we've talked about what Miller's trade value actually is with that contract, with the movement clause, all those sort of things. And I've repeatedly admitted that we don't know what his trade value is. But to sit there and say that that return from the Rangers is god-awful and the Canucks need to walk away from it, I just don't know if I agree, because I don't know if you're coming at it from the perspective of we need to make a trade to shake up the locker room. And that's fine. If fans don't think that needs to happen, that's fine. But if that's what the team's deciding, like, I'm not sure that I'm looking at that return and saying that is brutal. They can't possibly accept a deal like that.
Yeah, I mean, again, if you go down the road of trading JT, you kind of have to accept, and this is the advice I'd give Canucks fans, you're probably not going to get what you actually want. Like, the trade, if it happens, you'll get the notification on the Score app or on Twitter.
Canucks Army.
Canucks Army, wherever you see it, and you're going to see the initial maybe names and picks involved, and you're going to go, that's underwhelming. Like, I'd be shocked if there's any scenario where there's a trade and Canucks fans are excited at, like, whoa, look at what we got back. With it, because of the circumstances involved. You're talking about a guy with a no movement clause. You're talking about a guy who this season has been playing through injuries, which, if you're an acquiring team, like, that's got to worry you. His contract, keep in mind, he turns 32 years old, and is signed for a really long time. Like, there's risk attached to that contract. Teams are going to have question marks about locker room fit and being like, okay, like, whether it's true or not, what type of locker room fit is he going to be? He's a strong personality. How do we make sure that is conducive to our winning environment? There are a lot of question marks. And of course, his play this year hasn't been very good.
Yep.
So all of it is kind of a perfect storm, especially because the Canucks are looking into options mid-season when there aren't a lot of teams with the requisite cap space. So your potential pool of partners is already limited. Like, the Canucks are not negotiating from a strength of position at all. Now, to mention the specific Rangers package you were alluding to, yeah, that type of return on paper is underwhelming, but considering all the circumstances I laid out, it's not horrible.
I agree.
And the kicker would be, well, what are the details around that first round pick? Because if it's this year's first round pick and the Rangers obviously aren't in a playoff spot right now, that all of a sudden looks pretty attractive. And of course, that's where, the potential conditions involved being a reason the trade fell through. You can understand why there are complications around that. But that's what I would be most interested to know is, was that first round pick the Rangers' first this year? Because that all of a sudden, if you're talking about a first round pick in the teens, whether it be early teens, mid teens, late teens,
that's an impact player
in the middle six center. Like, that's not a great return, but it's not nothing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say, like I said, like, that's an impact player that you're probably drafting in that range. So we're going to continue down the timeline here. There's so much to get to, but the one thing I wanted to get to is this comment from Jordy Angus. He said they never should have signed Miller to the 8-year deal in the first place. The writing was on the wall for this core a few years ago, and they doubled down on it. I sympathize a little bit with this management regime for that, because they walked into a situation where it was like, okay, we know you've only been here a minute, but you have to pick between Bo Horvat and JT Miller. And they probably looked at it and said, okay, well, Bo Horvat's scoring a bunch of goals right now. He has never scored this many goals in his career. We will pay him, and I think this was an actual quote from Allvin, we will pay him like the player that he has been, not the player that he is right now. Something along those lines. The guy who's scoring, 30-plus goals, that's not what you were getting from Bo Horvat every year prior to that. So they looked at it and probably said, yeah, you know what? We're going to go with JT. We like the cap hit a little bit better. We like what he's going to agree to sign for. We want to do this. And they did it. So I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, maybe that wasn't a mistake. Clearly it was a mistake if they actually trade it. They're owning up to the idea that it was a mistake. But like we've said from the start, Harm, as soon as these rumors started up, plan A should and always was, in my mind, for these guys to just figure it out. For this core to just figure it out. For JT to bring it on a nightly basis. For Elias Pettersson to bring it on a nightly basis. What did we say last week? It's been clear for a while now that if they don't have Elias Pettersson and JT Miller both playing at their best, they're not going to do anything. All these conversations about puck moving and all these conversations about goaltending and whatever other conversation you want to have, none of it really matters if only one of these guys is going, and that's what the Canucks have gotten for the last little bit, and they're deciding that they need to move on from one in order to get everything going. And I think I want to touch on this aspect of it because there's some people in the chat that are mistaking what we're talking about for coddling Elias Pettersson. I want to be as clear as possible when I say this, and it's hard because it hasn't happened yet, and I don't want to sit here and speculate and make it sound like I'm being dramatic. But if the Canucks trade JT Miller, the pressure on Elias Pettersson is going to skyrocket, in my mind. It's only going to increase if they get rid of the other number one center or the other center behind Pettersson, and all of a sudden that's Pettersson's team. That's Pettersson's forward group. He's getting the matchups every night. It's not going to be P.S. Suter. It's not going to be Teddy Bluger. You hope. It's going to be Elias Pettersson playing that matchup role, being this team's number one center, and when he's not going, look, there's no one to fall back on. There's no one to fall back on at that stage. So please don't mistake this when we talk about this as, oh yeah, they're obviously making the right decision. Not that they're making the wrong decision, but they're obviously making the right decision, and Elias Pettersson can do no wrong, and they should never even have thought about trading him. That's not what we're saying. We're definitely not trying to say that. We're saying that if this is the path that they go down, get ready, because Elias Pettersson's going to have a lot of pressure put on him.
I mean, no doubt. And like, this is a situation too, where already considering how much he's made, like it's hard to imagine that the pressure the pressure should already be at a 10 out of 10 on Pettersson. Right. So it's hard to really say, oh, it should skyrocket, but you're right. It's going to firmly place the spotlight on him. And ultimately, look, this is what I've sort of believed for a long time is outside of just the age aspect, which I think is the biggest motivator for why you'd, if you're the Canucks and you look at it and go, well, one of them needs to go, which one should we choose to potentially move out? JT Miller turns 32 pretty soon here. Pettersson's 26. Like that's honestly the biggest reason you consider moving Miller first rather than Pettersson. But even beyond that, like with what Pettersson has shown in the past of being a 90 to 100 point player on top of quality two-way results, like your odds, I would rather bet on him returning and being that player again than bet on I'm going to try shopping him and winning a trade that way. Yeah. Now, like ultimately, like your best shot of ever figuring it out as a team and being a contender in this window with Quinn Hughes is with Pettersson returning to form. If it doesn't happen, they're going nowhere. If Elias Pettersson is not a superstar number one center, if he does not play like a top 10 center in the NHL, they are going nowhere. This is going to go nowhere.
Yep.
And so, yeah, absolutely. You're right. If Miller goes, it's all on Pettersson now to lead the forward core. And honestly, even if they get Pettersson back to playing at a superstar number one center level, with Miller gone, they're going to still need a lot more behind him. And again, that's why I think management's in a tough spot with the team right now.
I will also point to this comment as well. Calcio Storico said Pettersson played better when Miller was out of the lineup. Good point to note. During that 10-game leave of absence, we did see Elias Pettersson really elevate his game. So, again, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, look, if they just trade Miller, there you go. There's all this. There's your solution, and it's going to work itself out. It might, but I'm not going to sit here and say, yeah, they need to trade Miller so that Pettersson can play better. We don't know that's going to happen. We'd be foolish to sit here and suggest that, so we're not going to. But it was pretty undeniable, the production. 15 points in 10 games, as Mike Lavallee just put in the chat as well. Yeah, so we will see. And Dan, not a believer. He said Petey will melt under the pressure. Well, there's going to be more pressure, so you better hope that's not true if you're a Canucks fan.
And here's the thing. I'm not even going to sit here and say, for any fans that don't have the belief.
Absolutely.
That I'm not even going to disagree there necessarily. Like, I'll be honest. I have my doubts. I have doubts that you can win a Stanley Cup with Elias Pettersson as your best forward. I'm going to come out and straight up say it. Just like, yeah, he has that ceiling case there, but the level of consistency, and especially given how he played in the playoffs, like, I have doubts about whether you can win a Stanley Cup with Elias Pettersson as your best forward. 100%. But I think the odds are still higher of banking on him figuring it out, maturing, and reaching that consistent higher threshold than the alternative of what? Like, you're going to try moving him and you're going to get back an Eichel-like trade package with Alex Tuck, Peyton Krebs, a first-round pick, and that's going to increase your odds, right? Like, it's just about, like, these are the cards you're dealt. How can you best play your hand, right? And at this point, even though you may not love the idea of Pettersson leading your forward group and having all your eggs in that basket, that still represents your best shot from the position you're in right now.
Yeah, absolutely. You put it very well. We're still working through this timeline. It's taking a while, but let's continue here. The Canucks-Oilers game, we've hardly talked about it. A 3-2 win for the Vancouver Canucks, and post-game, again, how much do you want to talk about the game, Harm? We're going to get to the Myers cross-check after, but we're sticking on this Miller stuff. Miller had a great game. Pettersson had a pretty decent game. He was driving play. He did a lot of really good things. Doesn't have the points to show for it, which is, again, what actually is going to matter for a lot of people. But Patrick Allvin, one of the things he said today was talking about Pettersson and how he really likes the process and that the points are going to follow when he plays that way. So it's not just me sitting here and saying, yeah, Pettersson's played better. Like, Pettersson's two-way game has really shown itself, and it's starting to translate. Thursday night against LA as well. I don't know if you mentioned it on Friday, but DeBrusk hits a post after a nice setup from Pettersson. Lekkermäki hits a post after a nice setup from Pettersson. Could be 2 assists. It's not. We're not sitting here and saying, oh, cut him some slack. You need to produce points when you're paid as much as Pettersson is. That being said, I did want to at least mention that while Miller had a great game, Pettersson also had a pretty good game, despite the fact that Miller was the one that picked up the points. So it's not a matter of, one of these guys was going on Saturday. It was a good team win. It was a good team win for the Canucks. 3-2 victory, just 15 shots against.
Yeah, I mean, it was the most Canucks thing too ever, right? That the moment we're all talking about, the team looks broken and all these rumors that Miller trade nearly happened before puck drop, that they come out with arguably the best period of their season, right? And again, it was almost frustrating in a sense to walk away from that game and go, why can't they sustain that level of commitment and work ethic on a more consistent basis? And not that, look, every game you're going to put on a Mona Lisa defensively and you're going to limit a potent offense like the Oilers to 15 shots or whatever it was. Like, yeah, you're not going to have your A game every night, but it's more just the effort felt different, the competitiveness, how hard they were on the puck, how dialed in they were on their rotations. It was so reminiscent of last year's team, and last year's team did that 80 to 90% of games, and that ultimately is what has made this team so maddening to follow and track. Is before the game starts, you may as well flip a coin, roll a dice on what version of the Canucks you're going to get. And on Saturday night, they got a heck of a performance from this team, from this lineup, top to bottom. I even thought in the first period they were moving the puck well from the back end, direct passes out of the zone with possession. Like seeing Carson Soucy snap the puck up the ice to Elias Pettersson for an offensive zone entry with possession. It was like, oh yeah, your bottom four defensemen are allowed to make clean passes through the neutral zone, which then allow clean entries into the offensive end. And guess what? The Canucks looked fast. That's a huge part of it. Is a lot of times this year, there's been this question of, like the Canucks haven't looked that fast up front. Their forecheck hasn't been as effective. And I think a lot of that has just been their breakout has prevented them from being able to play fast. And I think last night was a good example of when your defensemen are a little bit more poised, when they are making cleaner plays, and when your forwards are also helping the defensemen out in other facets of the game, and you're really well connected, you look so much more faster, more aggressive, more physical, and they just smothered the Oilers.
Yeah, absolutely. It was a good game. It was a solid game for the Canucks. Absolutely. And that's what people are saying. They came up to play. Would be nice if they did it for more than one game, especially on home ice. But we'll see. That remains to be seen if this team's going to be able to do that. So let's continue here, because post-game, JT Miller spoke. He only wanted to talk about the game, but he did admit that this does feel a little bit different. He didn't want to get into it, but he was asked. I believe Drance was the one that asked him too. Just if with all, there's been trade rumors and all this sort of stuff going on for years and stuff, but does this time feel different? Didn't deny that. This is what JT Miller had to say post game.
So it's boring, but it's true.
I did notice though you took the 3 stars. Is there any sense of sort of knowing that the uncertainty's there, just sort of savoring what's been a pretty great run for you in this league?
That's a nice try. You gotta be a little more clever.
I'm gonna try to.
Okay.
If this was your last game in Vancouver, or is it meant to you to play here?
I'm not getting into this. I'm planning on being a Canuck today, tomorrow. Whatever happens. I'm focused on the next game.
In regards to the game, they're a team that gets.
I love that Gemma tried to ask and announce to him. Gemma Carson-Smith, Canadian Press, she's the best. She announces that I'm gonna try too, when he says you have to try harder than that. That was great. But yeah, like JT didn't want to talk about it post game, and he's well within his right to do that. You can just tell by the tone that this is different. This wasn't, everything's made up, nothing's going on. It's different. We don't need to get into it more than that, but that's the timeline of events of where we are now. And now it is Monday afternoon, and there's been no trade, but there was an Allvin press conference. Anything on Miller that you wanted to say before we get to Allvin?
Just in general, as we sort of wrap this conversation up for now, I don't want our fixation on the Miller conversation to be perceived as us pointing him out as a scapegoat for this, right? Like that's just the one thing that I want to make sure is a key takeaway is there is no like one scapegoat in why this team and why this core over the last number of years has underperformed for the most part. That's critical to keep in mind is if we are reaching the end of Miller's Canucks tenure, there were, from an individual standpoint and what he did, he was one of the most productive producers in the NHL during his time with the Canucks. Yes, there were definitely ups and downs, especially defensively, but for the most part, like that was the best trade Jim Benning has ever made. And I think fans know too that if this trade goes down, he's not a scapegoat. It's just an unfortunate reality of the situation, and that he had a heck of a run in Vancouver here.
And we'll see how it ends. But again, it's like you said earlier, Harm, the team didn't just wake up and make this decision today. We heard Brian Burke talking about it over on the sheet with Jeff Merrick. This idea that, well, obviously Rutherford and Allvin have tried to make this work with these two players, with this core. And clearly they believe that maybe public shaming will work. And then the leaks get out. And then that didn't work. The play still hasn't picked up, and now it's, okay, one of you has to go. And again, that was the thing that was decided 6 weeks ago, according to Rick Dollywell. If you're just joining us, that was some reporting from earlier today. Okay, so now we've got the timeline of events, another event that happened today. I don't even know if we can call this an event. Patrick Allvin spoke to media, did his classic, say a lot without saying much, but he did say some stuff, and I wanted to dive into it. First up, Brock Besser. He's asked about the idea of if there's any urgency about making a move with Brock Besser, whether that be extending him or trading him. Besser is obviously an unrestricted free agent at the end of this year. After the career year he had last year, the Canucks elected not to sign him to a contract extension. Jim Rutherford was very open with the fact that they were going to wait and see and let him prove it again. We'd never seen a year like that from Brock Besser, and I don't think anybody in the fan base was sitting there at the time and saying, no, they should extend him right now. This is the best time to extend him. Buy high. That's a great idea. Nobody was really saying that, but the trade deadline is approaching, and before the season, Patrick Allvin said if they don't, they will need to make a decision on Brock Besser by the trade deadline. Well, it's January 20th, and the March 7th trade deadline is fast approaching. So he was asked about if he's going to have to make a decision on that. Now, we're not going to play the clip. I'm just going to read the quote. He said, I wouldn't say there's urgency. I think we're still evaluating him. I have a great relationship with his agent, and when the time is right, we will make the decision. We know Brock and the conversation and are evaluating. And again, there are two sides of it too. It's got to work for both sides long term, and anything can happen here any day. So a very non-committal answer, which is par for the course for Allvin. We see that a lot, but also I believe them that they haven't decided what they're going to do with Brock Besser. I don't think he's withholding any information there.
It's interesting that they've been consistently lukewarm whenever asked about Brock. So there are a few different thoughts I kind of have on this. First, and this isn't based off any intel or reporting I've done. This is just me wondering out loud, and I want to get your take on this. Is I almost wonder if the Canucks are looking at this as a situation where they like the player, but considering how robust the market is going to be for Besser's services and for agency, how much leverage he has, how expensive his next contract is going to be. If it's a situation where it's we like the player and we'd like to ideally bring him back, but it would have to be at a discount relative to his market value for it to make sense. And if it doesn't, we're comfortable trading him and moving on. That's kind of my just read of the situation and how I'm kind of interpreting it from far. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean they're trading him for certain, but just based off the reporting to this point, their public commentary, how lukewarm they've sounded. I genuinely think they admire the player. They value him a lot. But I also think they're well aware that Besser's put himself in a really good position to net a ton of money. And I wonder how comfortable they are at the idea of a really long-term deal for Besser.
Okay, Jacob, I'm going to call on you here. What else do we have from Allvin? I have a lot written down. I don't know what we have in clips. Do we have a clip of Allvin?
We do, but it's 3 minutes long. He touches on a few different things. I can listen to it in the background and then kind of let you know, but I know.
Let's just play it. People want to hear about the GM.
Sure.
People want to hear from the GM.
We'll play it. Okay, a couple things that I actually had written down that I wanted to talk about. Or do you want to let the...
Well, he might talk about it in this.
Sure, okay.
It was, I believe he talked about the decor. He talked about home ice struggles. It was
Injuries,
that section.
Yeah,
of
all this. Okay, let's do
injuries.
it. Let's do it.
So we'll play it.
Yeah, here we go.
From the start of training camp, there were questions about the composition of your defense. And yes, Quinn's missed a little time, and obviously Philip was out longer than that. But are you comfortable with sort of the lack of puck moving lower on the depth chart on your defense core?
I think that those are things that when we constructed our overall team with the amount of money and what was available in the offseason, that was something we talked about. Whoever the way we want to play, we want to play a fast game, and obviously with Quinn and Roenick being out, it makes it a challenge. You asking guys to play more minutes, you're asking them to do more. You're asking Tyler Myers to run the power play, which might not be his strength. But again, you're watching times where our defense have shut down elite power around the league in games against Toronto, Colorado, Edmonton. The way we want to play and giving up 15 shots against Edmonton here Saturday, I think our defense might be criticized for a lot of things, but in the end of the day, they're extremely capable of defending. And the way I see it, it's a 5-man unit. So when our forwards are tracking back and supporting, it makes it easier for our defense. And the same thing goes with the transition game, where we are united and playing as a team when we're moving pucks fast. So I wouldn't say that it's just the defense. I think our overall game hasn't been to the level that probably it's needed to be consistent.
And what about, like, I know the coaches have a style they want this team to play, but you are also in the entertainment business. Like, are you comfortable with a team that's near the bottom in shots on goal on a nightly basis?
Well, if you see around the league, good teams, it's hard to create goals. And I believe that the fans want to see a team who win hockey games more than scoring goals and losing. I mean, if a high octane offensive team as Edmonton only had 15 shots, I take the pride in that and winning the game that way. I have no problem. I think in the end of the day, the fans deserves to see good hockey, and the fans deserves to see a team that winning.
Then what about the home record this year? I mean, they haven't seen a lot of wins here.
No, that's a concern, and it's not good enough up to this point for sure.
That was my question, Jeff. Credit to JPAT. Those were great questions. But, I think fans would rather see winning hockey than a team that scores and loses a bunch. Okay, well, how about a team that doesn't do either? How about a team that can't score and loses games? What about that? Do you think fans like seeing that? Because that's what they've seen, especially on home ice this season. Again, I've made my thoughts clear about this management regime's lack of ownership when it comes to their role in how this season's gone. The words Derek Forbert was injured should not be uttered in a press conference when you're talking about season struggles. I'm sorry, I know there's been injuries to Hughes and Hronek. A year ago, Patrick Allvin was talking about how, injuries aren't an excuse. That's the thing, this management regime's always said that. Injuries aren't an excuse. Last year, they get bounced from the second round. They're one win away from going to the third round of the playoffs, and Patrick Allvin wasn't sitting on his laurels or happy. He was mad. He was angry coming into that press conference saying, we haven't won anything, we didn't do anything, and we got to be better next year. Then we hear, we're a playoff team if everything goes right. What is going on? I was baffled. I was baffled by that press conference, I must say.
To me, he sounded like a GM that understood that when he did the IMAC interview, right, and had some bombs in there, appeared to call out quite a few people in the organization. That in hindsight, the organization probably realized that created more issues than it did fuel the team in a positive way. And so because of that, I imagine the strategy heading into this press conference was to keep things calm, say very little that is going to gain traction and put even more heat on the organization or the players. Yet having said all that, I can agree with that logic and that rationale that a quiet press conference is probably what this organization needed.
Sure.
But you could have had both that and still seen Allvin and management take some accountability as a front office for some of the missteps that they took. I didn't like his answer on the lack of puck moving on the back end.
Yep.
And again, I think part of that is, sure, you want to protect your defensemen, you don't want to criticize them too harshly, but to not even outright acknowledge that it's been a weakness that has plagued the team was disappointing to me, and to heap praise on them for the way they defended against Toronto, Edmonton, Colorado. You can't cherry pick your 4 or 5 best games of the season. we're 40 something games into the year. What about the other 35 to 40 games where your blue line has largely been a weakness? And so I get it. He's trying to build up the defense, make them feel better and not take shots at them. But ultimately, that there's a middle ground there where you could where they could take accountability and ownership that they need to improve some of the deficiencies there, and that they perhaps miscalculated in constructing the blue line and not having enough puck moving talent there.
I tweeted this quote out, and I'm not sure if it was in there, but he said, "Our defense might be criticized for a lot of things, but at the end of the day, they're extremely capable of defending." That was the quote from Patrick Allvin today. Yeah, the press conference, like I saw on Twitter, people were like, "Oh, he didn't announce a Miller trade or talk about a Meyer suspension." I said this off the top of the show as well. It's very normal for GMs to just have mid-season media availabilities. That's all this was. It was just like, there's a lot of things going on. Let's get answers on all of them. Yeah, I don't know. Like, I'm not sitting here and saying, "Oh, this is baffling. This is a horrible, horrible press conference," or anything like that. It was just like, would have liked to have heard some more accountability. That's all. I would have liked to have heard that. Would have liked to have heard that a month ago when I first started talking about this. But yeah.
I also thought it was really funny when he was like, "I feel really bad for players when they're reading trade rumors." It's like, hold on a second. Can we rewind to like 3 weeks ago when you ignited all this trade speculation around Elias Pettersson, for example, by saying, "Oh yeah, we might trade Elias Pettersson"?
Anything's possible. That was the quote. It was very funny. But yeah, I don't think there's much to get to when it comes to the Allvin presser. Like, yeah, I liked the questions from Jeff. I'll say that. I like Jeff's questions a lot. It was good. This one from the Blazers fan 22. He said, "Yeah, they are capable of defending, but they can't even move the puck up. Every time they move the puck up, it gets turned over. They are back to defending again. They're extremely capable of defending, so they want to do it as much as possible." That's a good one. Okay, let's get to anyone else, which is brought to you by our friends over at Greta. Come down to Greta Bar YVR for a thrilling evening presented by Fountain Tire as we watch Vancouver take on Edmonton on January 23rd. There's going to be exciting giveaways, including hockey tickets, signed memorabilia, and jerseys to be won. Doors open at 5 p.m. and puck drop is at 6 p.m. Each ticket grants you access to all the action, and it's all in support of One Broken Biker. Our VIP 4-person reservation includes entry into the event, Greta Burger and beverage, plus a game card. Don't miss out. Secure your spot now at nationgear.ca for an action-packed night with the Canucks Army crew. January 23rd. Gonna be a good time. I also found out yesterday, and I wanted to kick off anyone else with this. I went to the Abbotsford Canucks game. Carpooled with Faber. Good guy, of course. We saw the girls from Girls at the Games. I don't know if you've seen their page. They're like about a month old. They're a new sort of publication. They're starting everything up, and they're trying to put a different spin on covering sports. And they're trying to cover sports. I can't remember the exact wording that they use, but basically like make it so that female sports fans have a place to go. And we're partnered with them for this event. I found that out yesterday. Nobody told me that, but they're going to be at the event too. So it's going to be really fun because it was funny because I introduced myself and we were just chatting with them. And then they were like, "Yeah, like we're getting into events too. Like we're doing something with Canucks Army." And then Chris just started laughing and started pointing at me and was like, "He is Canucks Army." And it wasn't brought to my attention yet, but I'm excited about it. It was brought to my attention yesterday. I'm excited about it. Gonna be a great time. Come hang out with us. Gonna be a good time. I want to talk about this Abbotsford game. Abbotsford's on a 6-game winning streak after a 6-game losing streak. I went out there yesterday. I had a few things that I want to talk about in terms of player performance, but the one thing I want to lead off with was I was super impressed with Manny Malhotra. As a coach, his demeanor post-game when I was talking to him was that he was very cognizant of the fact that his team a month ago, like I think the exact quote he gave me was that a month ago when things don't go our way, and I guess I should have prefaced this because not everybody watches the Abbotsford Canucks or reads Abbotsford Canucks coverage over at Canucks Army, but they played better. They were absolutely the better team, but a bad bounce off the stanchion kicked off the third period and meant that they were trailing because Sheloves went behind the net to play the puck that was going to be rung around the boards, and then it hit the stanchion and went right to the middle of the ice. Empty net goal. Super easy goal for San Jose to score. So the Canucks were behind the 8 ball early in that one after already being down 2-0 to start that game. But they were just so resilient. They just didn't come out of their game plan at all. Like you could tell that they were just sticking to what was happening. There was no individual efforts. There was no cheating the game at all. And Manny was so proud of his guys after that game and talked about a guy like Atu Ratu, who's now got 9 points in his past 6 games. Talked about a guy like him and how good he's been at just kind of being a big focal point of the team, and we see the 6-game winning streak, the numbers for some of these guys. Linus Karlsson's got 6 goals, 3 assists through 6 games as well, so he also has 9 points, 6 goals. Nils Aman, Faber and I were joking, Nils Aman's Pavel Datsyuk in the AHL. Like, he's so good in the AHL. He was picking corners. He scored a goal where he picked a corner last night, and I immediately said to myself, like, I've never seen him not shoot at a crest before. That was phenomenal to see him just pick a corner. Maybe that's something he's going to add to his arsenal. But things are going well down in Abbotsford right now, and I was down there. Another takeaway I had, other than Manny Malholtra's a great coach and Jonathan Lekermacki scores the game-winning goal, we know he's going to make plays at that level. Another take I had was Elias Pettersson's going to play NHL games. Like, he's good. He's legitimately so good, and he has taken such a big step from the last time I actually saw him in person, was at training camp. Like, Harman, you and I were talking about it. Like, he was looking at his feet. He's like looking at the puck. He's unsure of where he's going. We saw those preseason games, all those errors in his game where it was like, okay, he needs to get more comfortable. Like, I know it's just the AHL, but man, he's looking comfortable. Like, he was moving the puck so well. He was bracing for contact. All of his angles on the wall, everything was perfect in his game. And maybe I just caught him at a good time, but he is an AHL all-star, and Manny was talking as well about the steps that he's taken in his games. I just wanted to say I'm super impressed with Pettersson. I think he's going to play games. We lost Harm.
Yeah,
couldn't
Harm. I
take
could
the
hear
Elias
your-
Pettersson praise.
He is
You're good.
the style of defenseman that this management group and coaching style loves, right? A big physical stay-at-home type defenseman who can kill penalties, but is also legitimately mobile. Like, he's not a tree trunk. He's not a guy that opposing team dumps the puck in and he takes 5 years to turn on his edges and loses the race to retrieve the puck.
Yeah.
That's key. Right now, of course, he's not a puck mover. He's not going to necessarily excel in that area at the NHL level, but it's a difference, right? Between, let's say, an Ian Cole and a Derek Forbert, right? And Pettersson's an even better skater than Ian Cole, obviously, but Ian Cole and Derek Forbert at the NHL level, they basically occupy a very similar role as sort of veteran number 6, penalty killing defenseman. But the difference is, even though neither one is a natural puck mover, when you have an Ian Cole in that pairing as opposed to Forbert at even strength, it does make a tangible difference with respect to your team's breakouts and how well they can push the pace offensively. So hopefully Pettersson can mold into that style of defenseman over the next couple of years where, yeah, he'll give you that size, that physicality, that defensive responsibility, while also being mobile and just skilled enough to where he can be a secondary contributor on the breakout too.
Put it well. You put it really well. And as somebody who's watched him in the past 24 hours, Harm, not to step on your toes or anything. I'm joking. I'm just joking. But yeah, I was really impressed with him. People were asking me about Cole McWard as well. He's fine. Yeah, like, you're not. We talked about this, the Brandstrom bar, right? Like, I'm excited about Elias Pettersson. I'm excited about him, but I'm not sitting here and say, yeah, call him up. I'm just saying that down the road, he's going to play NHL games. Like, for sure he is. Speaking of which, Mark Friedman is an absolute beast in the AHL. He got called up today, clearly being rewarded for his great play. No, not actually. He was called up with what we anticipate is the team expecting a Tyler Myers suspension. Myers spoke today, and he gave his perspective on the cross-check on Bouchard. We haven't even really talked about that, but yes, obviously the game against the Oilers ends in some melee. Let's play the Myers clip. This is what he said at practice today when he was asked about the cross-check to Evan Bouchard's face.
Not a lot. I mean, things were getting heated there at the end. I know how, I'm not ignorant to the fact of how it looks in real time, but if you slow it down, I did start lower, and as he started to bring his hands up, it kind of redirected my stick a little higher. I know how it looks. I never intended to hit him in the face. I've never cross-checked anyone in the face in my whole career, so I was talking to him at the red line after. Seemed to be okay. So I don't want to hit a guy in the face like that, and it was unfortunate that it ended up that way, and glad he's okay.
I always wish a player would come out and say, yeah, of course I was trying to cross-check him in the face. But we did get something similar to that, because that melee at the end of the game, and for those that don't know what we're talking about, obviously there was the Connor Garland aspect of it, and there was the Evan Bouchard, Connor Garland, Connor McDavid, then Evan Bouchard skates towards Tyler Myers. Tyler Myers cross-checks him in the face. Connor Garland held down Connor McDavid for the final 15 seconds of that game. He was, I don't think we have the audio, but he was completely forthcoming with the fact that he was just holding him. He's like, it's like, what happened there? Oh yeah, we got tangled up. He goes, no, I was just holding him. Like he was totally upfront with it. He just said, yeah, I was holding him. That's probably the best way to win a game at that juncture. And obviously that frustrated McDavid. He cross-checks Connor Garland in the face. I'm going to be honest. I did not spend my Sunday. This is the thing. I always explain this. I don't really use social media aside from when I have to for work. And I deemed yesterday a day that I didn't have to, but I logged on today where I was trying to catch up on everything I missed. Apparently, Oilers fans and Canucks fans were just going at it about this, and Oilers fans were heated. I don't understand. You're fine to feel the way you feel. I just can't be bothered to care or try to change your mind. I don't even have a hard opinion on this. Both guys are going to get suspended. I don't get what the big deal is, but apparently people were fighting about it. I'm not going to join that fight, but it was a little melee at the end of that game.
Garland is such a G. That's my biggest takeaway from all this, because honestly, from a pure winning the game perspective, that is the smartest decision he could have made, to just hold McDavid in the slot. Because keep in mind, there were 20 seconds left on the clock. And this is the part I don't understand, is a lot of Oilers fans are saying, oh, none of this would have happened if the refs had just called the penalty. Do they realize that it would have been a delayed penalty and the Oilers held the puck for the next 15 seconds? The play wouldn't have been blown dead. You likely would have still had the same outcome. And that's part of the reason why it was such a genius ploy by Garland, is because, sure, refs want to call a penalty. The Oilers are going to have to, the Canucks are going to have to possess the puck before that penalty is called. And the Oilers they were in full control. And even if there was going to be a call, the play probably wouldn't have stopped for, maybe it wouldn't have stopped at all. Maybe the entire game clock would have ended there. So that was sort of my take from that. And obviously both cross checks are terrible. They're to the head, they're to the face, can't happen. And to me, both of them deserve the same punishment, whatever that suspension ends up being.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And we haven't got it yet. But we're assuming it's going to come down at some point today. No suspension yet, but.
Well, and I will mention, if it's a 1-game suspension, that means McDavid's return is Thursday night against the Canucks, and you can watch that one with us at Greta. So we'll see. If it's a 2-game or more, McDavid will miss that game against Vancouver. So we'll see how it ends up happening. But if both Myers and McDavid are playing that game, could get very, very interesting on Thursday.
And I don't agree with this idea that, you have to give them 2 games because they can't meet each other again. This is the most water under the bridge thing. I don't think either guy is going to really care about it. I don't think this is going to be I don't know. I don't even want to talk about this more. This is just silly in my view. Anything else you want to get to, Harm?
No.
Okay. I talked about Abbotsford. All right, let's get to. Oh no, here we go. Sorry, I want to get this one. Rajcraft asked this: what players that have been rumored as a return in a Miller trade do you think the Canucks should avoid? We've both been saying this from the start, but Mika Zibanejad, even hearing his name even mentioned, troubles me, because you want to know how you lose. And again, when you were talking about how to win a JT Miller trade, you're talking about those 3 things. Cap space was one of them. You instantly lose a JT Miller trade phenomenally if you bring back Mika Zibanejad in that trade. So no, I think that's the only player that I'm sitting there and saying, do not trade for Mika Zibanejad. And I don't have takes on Zach Jones. I will say, can you explain to me why people are excited about Alexis Lafreniere? He's getting outscored by Capo Caco. I know he's a great 2-way player, but what's going on? I don't understand why people are excited about him. This idea of a 1-for-1 Miller Lafreniere trade.
I still think there's a world where Lafreniere could really turn into a star. I'm not talking 100-point player, but go back to last year. He scored 28 goals and nearly 60 points, despite barely getting power play one time. You know how hard it is to score nearly 30 goals in the league when you don't get power play one time? Not to mention, he's still 23 years old. And in the playoffs, he was dominant. Like in the playoffs, he was oftentimes the Rangers' best player. And yeah, it's been a disappointing year for him in New York this year, but it's also been a disappointing year for basically everybody on that roster. And when you have a situation like that, sometimes a change of scenery does something to spark them. And again, the biggest thing for me is people will look at Lafreniere's point totals on paper early in his career and go, it's all pretty kind of underwhelming. And yeah, look, I would be shocked if he ever lives up to the number 1 overall billing. But I still absolutely see a scenario where he could be like a consistent 70-ish point producer, guy who can give you 30 goals, 70 points. Keep in mind too, look at how long it took JT Miller to find his stride. And Lafreniere, yeah, it feels like he's been in the league forever, but he is still 23 years old. And again, last year, I'm telling you, he was so dynamic. He looked like the type of player who could drive a line in the playoffs, especially the way that he was creating zone entries. So I wouldn't scoff at the idea of if there's a way to target Lafreniere as part of a JT Miller return. I would be on board with that if I'm the Canucks.
All right. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
To me, that's a way better guy to go after than Philip Hedl. And I like Philip Hedl, but Hedl's had concussion concerns, and he doesn't have the same level of ceiling.
So, okay, a Lafreniere trade, you're talking 1-for-1 then, right?
I'll be honest, I don't know.
Well, if it's Lafreniere plus, I'm on board. But if we're talking
it's not going to be Lafreniere plus, realistically.
Okay, so... Okay, I don't know then. I'm not going to sit here and say...
No.
I'm going to sit here and say Capo Caco's outscoring him right now.
Sure.
Fact.
Sure. But at the end of the day, think about all the other... Again, the context is the Canucks aren't going to win a JT Miller trade.
Mm-hmm.
Like, they're just not. And so given the context of how weak a negotiating position the Canucks are in, like, put it this way, if JT Miller gets dealt within the next week, I'd be surprised if the best player they get in the deal is better than Lafreniere.
Yeah.
Over the next 5 years. I'd be willing to say that right now.
I like it. So this is why I asked you about him, because I was going to sit here and say, why would you trade for Alexis Lafreniere? But we'll see.
And honestly, that's not so much like part of it is like I think I'm higher than Lafreniere than most people, but also part of it is I just really don't. I'm a bit pessimistic about Miller's trade value at this point.
That's fair. That's very fair. That's fair. Okay. Yeah, this is good. This is really good stuff. I don't know what's going to happen. Like I said, anniversary dinner tonight. Really hoping we don't have to do an emergency episode. I won't be too far from the studio, I don't think, so maybe that'll be how I spend my anniversary.
And
we'll see.
I've got work going on here, so I'll be in the studio, Quad. So if you got to swing by, I'll set up the camera for you. We'll go live.
Perfect. Okay, we're set then. Yeah, I'm sure she'll love that. Okay, Harman, final thoughts? Harman's mic keeps muting. Harman has no final thoughts.
Let's just see where things go. The funniest part in all this would be if there's a scenario where after believing, the end is here for Miller, that how this drags out forever. And
it's 2028, and the Canucks are rumored to be talking about JT Miller with teams.
And we can't rule that possibility out either. It's not a guarantee he's getting moved, but man, it really feels like the writing is on the wall.
All right, there it is. Writing's on the wall, but we'll see, because you never know what that writing actually says. Episode 745 of Canucks Convo. JT Miller has not been traded. We will see tomorrow if that's still the case. We will see if that's the case next week as well, and as we go throughout the week. Let's get to our Bet365 bet of the day, which is brought to you by Bet365. Let's go with, what do I see here? Yeah. No. Why are they? Okay. Oh no, this game's happening right now. Okay, never mind. Sorry, I was like, why are these odds so weird? The game's already started. I forgot the Sabres and Kraken played early today. I can't do live bet comebacks as my bet of the day, so I'm not going to. But let's go to... Sorry, this is taking a while. Let's go to the Tampa Bay Lightning. Keep this on the list as an underdog pick. Tampa Bay Lightning are facing the fraudulent Toronto Maple Leafs tonight. You can get them at plus 120 on the money line. You can get that over at Bet365, a proud partner of Canucks Conversation. Open an account with Bet365 today and bet on a huge range of markets. Whatever the moment is never ordinary at Bet365. Be sure to use code NATION when you sign up for an account. Must be 19 plus to play. If you choose to play, please play responsibly. All right, we will close it out there. For my co-host Harman Dowd and our technical producer Jacob Lazar, my name is Dave Quadrelli. Thanks so much for the episode of Canucks Conversation. Canucks Conversation is live Monday through Friday, every weekday at 2 p.m. over on the Canucks Army YouTube channel. Make sure you like, subscribe, and interact in the YouTube live chat every day with us, folks.